very tight check and balance safety system. We check the children in every day on a monthly basis. Well, the kiosk that we designed and the city, allowed us to have that, and was in the other lot that then became the parking lot, and then it got moved behind the library. Well, that kiosk worked fine for 55 students. Now that we're hitting 110 plus students, we can't all get them checked in this small time frame we have before school. We realize we really have got to have an additional kiosk, and we also have additional teachers and we have additional volunteers to make sure that we can get all those children checked in safely and take off at 7:20 so we get to school by 7:30. So we would like to ask approval to enter in this placemaking grant with the Baldwin County Association of Realtors, and we would add the kiosk, we would add a little free library that we think we would dedicate to Tico and Hollis Wiseman, as Hollis helped with the original library being started, and Tico started really all of the Safe Routes to School movements are a result of the Trailblazers and Tico's efforts to make that happen. And some benches that people could sit, and because the National Association of Realtors wants the area to meet like 10 basic purposes that citizens would utilize that area. So we see people could sit on their Wi-Fi, people could sit and read a book, people can sit and watch the activity going on, and the kiosk can also be used by the library for their programming, whether it might be a puppet show, whether it might be any other activity they have. Right now, the one kiosk we have is full of chairs and tables that we have to have there because we've got to set up multiple check-in points, again, to be able to check all the children in on time. So the tables and chairs would go out from there. There would be another kiosk that I would assume would be portable. That was a requirement of the city council in case any change in the land use were to occur. They wanted to know that it could be moved, and I already have a person who's agreed to help design it, so it could be the kiosk and perhaps a little bit of a book nook too. So that's what we're kind of asking permission, and that this would be agreeable with the city of Fairhope, that that the Trailblazers enters into this, since it is located on city property. And we have spoken in collaboration with the library, and they are supportive of that plan also. I believe Tamara might be here.
Is she here?
She's not, but I've met with her several times, and she's written an email to say the library, and we have talked briefly with their board, and they are supportive of it. And so it may turn out that this first deadline for the Placemaker grant is like October 14th we need it in, and then an identical grant is available January 15th. So with some of the information that needs to be gathered to make it happen, it might be more reasonable to make the application in January. But we just wanted to come in front of the council and mayor and council to put this out in front of you and make sure that y'all are pretty much in agreement that you like this idea. We do have Jennifer here representing the Baldwin County Association of Realtors, and also Sheila Dobson.
So, Charlene, what's required on behalf of the city? Is there a resolution that we have to adopt saying that we're in favor of this?
Before y'all did adopt a resolution,
allowing you to place the kiosk
right,
on the city property?
and then you did give your protocol for, you wanted me to go in front of the building. You wanted that there were with Eric with the building department. You wanted several protocols about it being able to be moved. Now I would assume you would still want it to be a portable structure in case in any case land use were to change.
Okay. So you said that the grant had to be submitted by the 15th, but then you said you might wait until the January?
January 15th. So it's either October 15th or the same grant comes up again, another grant, the exact same Placemaker grant, which is all about making good places in cities and collaboration between the realtors and other community groups to make the city a more livable area. Yeah. So that same grant is due in January, is available in January. So I'm thinking with the short time frame, January application date may be the best one, rather than trying to get this in 4 days.
Okay, but you're not foregoing, if you forego this first grant, you're not losing out on You can't get both, can you?
Oh, no, it's only one grant. Let me make sure, correct, Jennifer and Sheila, yeah, one grant. And I won't lose anything by waiting, but we can have our ducks better in a row by waiting.
Yeah.
I haven't got an estimate of what the kiosk would cost. We don't have a design. You know, before y'all did want to see the design too. And I went again in front of the building department with that. So you wanted, you know, your city wanted to know what is going in that space and what's it going to look like. And I don't know whether you've been by to see the kiosk, but it's quite delightful.
No. Council, any objections?
None. I think, Charlene, you do a great job with that program, and I think the fact that you've grown it to that level certainly speaks a lot about your commitment to it. So
Thank you.
I would love to see us continue to support that.
Robert?
No, that's fine. It's a fine deal.
Yeah, I would say move forward, and I would probably get with Eric
Okay.
just to make certain that there's not any kind of rules or regulations. And I think that it would probably be helpful just to have a letter from the library stating that they're in agreement with where you've decided to put it. And I can't see where we would probably challenge any locating of that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so that's 110, that's just the students, right?
Oh, that's just the students.
So what do you have, 150 people walking to school?
Oh, easily.
Wow.
Easily. And tomorrow is International Walk to School Day. I would like to
Oh, is that
invite
tomorrow?
all of you to come if you would like to come. And we're doing a special recognition. The children do a countdown every morning. And because it's International Walk to School Day, we have 6 children that are going to do the countdown in 6 different languages, which is kind of a real neat thing. So we've got, it's just really cool to watch the kids own the countdown, that they are the ones who start off the walking school bus by their countdown.
What time will it be there, 7:15?
7:15, yes. We start the walk. Yes, 7:15 we'll be doing the countdowns because I've got number. So we would love to have y'all participate and kind of just see what is occurring. It's gotten a lot of recognition from a lot of places, and I am getting inquiries now about replication of this occurring in close by cities as well as faraway cities are very interested in how they can take all these cars out of line and get students to school focused and have a happy community that's a part of it.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Charlene.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Charlene.
Okay. All right, next item, Pedestrian and Bicycle Committee recommendations.
Hey guys, can you hear me? I'm taller than Charlene. My name's Meredith Montgomery. I don't think I've met most of you, but myself and Chris Riley are the co-chairs of the Bike and Pedestrian Committee. My family enjoys biking into town whenever we can, and for the last 3 years, my son and I mostly bike, sometimes walk to school almost every day. So when I began that route, I was in close contact with the public works director, kind of saying, oh, we need to do this, we need to do this around the route. And when I drove her crazy, she sent me to the committee. So I've been on that committee for about 1.5 years. And today, ongoing, the committee has been working really hard to put a priority list together. And a lot of those items have to do with bicycle parking and paths in the city. So over the last year, we've worked hard to refine that list to both short-term and long-term goals. And today we're making 2 relatively simple recommendations that we feel would make a significant improvement for those wanting to bike into town. Our first recommendation is the installation of bike racks in 4 downtown locations, which I believe you have it's on the screen, and I believe it's in your handout. There's a map that shows the existing bike rack locations, which is pretty minimal. And then we are recommending 4 new locations. Those locations would be here at City Hall, 1 at the Welcome Center, 1 on South Section Street near the entrance to the French Quarter, and then lastly at Bancroft Street and Fairhope Avenue, that little area next to Jewel Winds, where there's some benches. So like I said, if you've ever biked downtown, you'll notice that there's not a lot of places to park your bike. So when we were determining effective locations for additional bike racks, we made sure that each location met the following criteria. We wanted them to be close in proximity to businesses, restaurants, parks and government facilities. We wanted them to have good visibility, so not off in a corner. We wanted them to be in a suitable space so that they avoid conflicts with both vehicles and people on foot. And we also wanted to make sure that they were useful for both residents and visitors and tourists. So we have a much longer list of recommended locations, but we feel like these 4 would be a great first step. Let's see, we've also discussed the types of rack styles that we think would be effective. Okay, perfect. So there's 2 recommended styles you'll see pictures of in there. And the committee researched and discussed this pretty extensively. And we concluded that the most effective racks are simple in design, easily recognizable for their use, and adaptable to the location. So we recommend that either an inverted U, which is what's on the screen now, or a bike hitch style be used. And both of these, you can customize them with color, you can add logos, you can make them a little more creative if we did want to have, the Fairhope signal or the Fairhope logo or a bike symbol. That is all possible. So that's our first recommendation. The second recommendation is the installation of bike lanes on the block of Church Street between Fairhope Avenue and Magnolia Avenue. So that's that block where the mural is, where Old Bay Steamer is, that single block. The bike lanes are incomplete right there. So we know that the road is wide enough for there to be 5-foot bike lanes in both directions. And adding the lanes on that block would connect the existing lanes on Church Street and also to the lanes on Magnolia. So the incomplete nature of the existing lanes are not too user-friendly for those who are intimidated by riding in car lanes. And painting bike lanes on the single black block, we believe, is a simple first step to expand and connect the existing bike lanes. And then the last thing I want to say is I just wanted to point out that we feel that these recommendations benefit the whole community, not just the cyclists. Long term, by making bicycling safe, accessible, and convenient, the city fosters parking and traffic relief downtown. And also studies show that there are economic benefits of bicycle facilities as well. So,
Questions, council?
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. I'm the liaison for the committee, and thank you to Meredith and to Chris for, we felt like maybe starting out with something simple. We do have, some bigger projects to move forward with. However, the bike racks and just this one simple striping of one city block to complete the bike lanes downtown, we thought would be a positive step forward.
I will have to say that it's rare that somebody comes in with a recommendation right off the bat that seems pretty doable without breaking the budget, just the initial. So, when you see these pages, you think, oh, gosh, this is going to be $1 million, right? And so it's nice to see this. We've been really talking about bike racks since I've been on the council, and it's just really no excuse to not have put some up. I guess, Sherry Lee, I see I'm looking at you. I'd probably, you've been involved in talking to people about these placements. Were you involved with any of these discussions and in agreement with that? And
you can't tell Meredith no. So basically whatever she asked for. No, they've done so much work. The Bike Pay Committee's been working on this for years. And I think when my first week, you may have reached out to me about this, and it made perfect sense, and it fits into the studies that have been done. These 4 areas, you all who bike everywhere had determined that this was the right place to put these 4. And Dan Burden obviously was his recommendations were a big part of this, so it seemed like a no-brainer, but. And I think, Robert, you've been to all the meetings. I've met, separately with several committee members. They've been really dedicated, and I don't see any reason not to do it.
Well, the way I see it is you can you got to start somewhere, put them somewhere, and if you find out they're not being utilized, just move them.
That's right.
See if they get utilized.
Right. And the one thing the committee, went back and forth and struggled with was whether to make it this simple inverted U, something that might be a little more universal, place them around town, and make them a brighter color where you can recognize it. Mm-hmm. And if you see one, then the next one you see, you'll know, you'll get familiar with it rather than trying to get too artsy with it and having a creative bike rack that might look neat, but nobody's gonna know it's a bike rack. So that's why we kind of ended up where we were with this.
People are afraid to attach their bike to a
Well,
sculpture.
they don't, if it's different all around town, then they don't know what it is. So just going with a simple universal design.
Agreed. And they are really affordable. So start with these 4. We had talked about moving forward, maybe doing another adopt a bike rack type program. There's all sorts of things we could do, but we need them.
Not that it's a big deal, but is the 1,500 for all 4 locations?
It is.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Wow.
Without the customization, I think just a standard rack is about 125 a piece.
Okay.
And so we were thinking, at each of those locations, you would do a group of those bike racks, so like a series of 4. But the racks are nice because, they're just as functional if you have one in a single place, but you can group them for a larger biking parking area, depending on where you put them.
Well, council, I think maybe if you want to provide some input, but this is something that we can, right in this meeting, just ask the mayor to authorize the expenditure of and the striping, and I think you probably want to run that by our planning and make sure they don't have any hiccups with the bike lanes, but on the bike racks, you have the authority to authorize that right now if you so choose.
Good with that.
And my vote would be to encourage you to do that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Meredith. Thanks, Chris.
All right.
Tanya.
Okay.
Whoever you are.
Tanya's a dog.
All right, discussion for a proposed updated franchise agreement. Ms. Mazur? And you should have a copy of this in your package.
We're just sort of tightening up some loopholes. We noticed we had an issue this summer with a vendor down in the pier area that was a food vendor that was using city electricity to keep an air conditioner running 24/7 for a business that he was open 2.5 to 3 days of the week. Also, it was food that he was serving. And there was no running water. There wasn't anything there for him to clean his hands, clean his equipment, or anything like that. Whereas we had a similar business on private property that had to hook up to running water at the restaurant next door and had to pass a Serve Safe certificate and various other issues that the health department requires. So it just seemed logical to us that we needed to insert in the current franchise agreement 3 recommendations that address the electricity and the Serve Safe issues for food. And it's just an addition, it's not changing anything else that's in there. Food was not addressed in the initial franchise agreement.
You want to point, it's
Yeah,
section
it's-
1.2 EFG, correct?
Right. It's under the requirements for franchise.
Back side of the first page at the bottom of section 1.2.
The first 2, E and F, refer to food franchises, in particular with the health department regulations. And Serve Safe, every restaurant in the city has a Serve Safe certification, and there's no reason for a food vendor to show up and not have it. And when you consider that franchises we get 20% of the gross revenues off of these franchise businesses, would behoove us to make sure that if it's a food vendor, he's following all the health department regulations before we are considered a part and parcel of something that's not quite kosher, so to speak. G is referring to the use of electricity, which is not addressed at all in the franchise agreement, and it was being used for free. And we couldn't understand why the city would ever supply a franchisee with free electricity. He got it because he plugged into the outlet on the streetlight. And that was real simple to do. It wasn't metered. I did go with Joe Wolchina, and we were looking at various areas where we could potentially meter somebody who needed city electricity. But that also meant they had to be located in very specific areas, and one of them would be right in South Park, and not exactly desirable to be looking at in the park and taking up park area for people's recreation. So then the thought came, okay, supply your own generator. And we did research, there are generators that are quiet enough that meet the city noise ordinance that can be done. So if somebody wants to be serving food enough, has a business he believes in, he can get a generator, take care of his own electricity, and also take care of his health department issues.
Questions, council?
You know, when I see something like this, it just seems to make so much sense as to why didn't it exist before. It makes me think I'm missing something. I mean, is there some reason why this wasn't already included?
I don't know.
I don't think it was ever intended that people were going to get electricity
Food trucks, yeah.
included. Water was included to, and there's very, very few franchise agreements
Right.
in the entire city. You know, I guess this just, you know, it's fairly new that we have these. It's just one of those you learn and you adjust as you move on.
And the franchise agreements may be increasing, especially if, you know, with the city growing and summer clientele and whatever.
I think eventually it would be better to have power to these that they could meter, maybe not the one that is existing right now, but in the future, because I do think the generator would
Yeah,
take
I don't
away
have a problem
from
putting a meter there if they want to, were in a position to where they could. Of course, I think it might be something that, well, if they want a meter and we can't get them a meter, we have to say, well, we just can't supply you
Can't
one
supply
there.
it.
But I'm not opposed to a meter.
It limits the locations of where they can be, where we can meter them.
Well, maybe you give them the option. Maybe we write in here that, you know, where a meter can't be provided, they must provide, you know, their own generator power to comply with the noise ordinance.
Because the generators have come a long way in terms of noise and people think of them as.
Noise, gas smell.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
but
I don't wanna
that's,
be down there
I think of
smelling
gas.
fumes.
yeah, they've pretty much covered that too.
You know, G, if we wanted to alter G, we could say, no franchise shall be granted by the city to any, it shouldn't even say food vendor, any vendor who has refrigeration, or, I think you could even get rid of refrigeration, heating requirements, say any vendor who has electrical requirements, without having a generator to supply the power required, which meets the Fairhope noise ordinances, or, if applicable, securing a meter for power. Because you may run into a situation where it's not a food vendor.
That's true.
It could be somebody that is renting paddle boards that wants to put a air conditioner in their trailer and run it. We just meter them, you know, say it's paddle board renter that comes to all the council meetings, somebody like that.
Not picking on anybody, but
Not that I know any of those. Just as a thought, I think that makes it a little bit more general in nature and doesn't preclude anybody. Because as sure as we write in food, the next one will come up, it won't be a food vendor, and then they need power.
That's true, yeah. It's better to cover them all.
Somebody that's, you know, blowing up balloons down there and they need a generator or air compressor
Yep.
that meets the noise ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that, council?
I think that sounds
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I would even go so far as to say on E, Lynn, to say any food vendor or any other franchisee that has a water requirement. You know, I don't know whom else might have it, but there may be, just as a catch-all, say anyone else that might require water. They have to provide their own
Okay.
until such time we could find a way to do it and meter it, but it's getting
If
kind
you
of
have the health
sticky.
department requirements in there, that covers it all too.
Put the what now, Mary?
If you have the health department requirements
Right.
in there, that
Yeah.
does cover it all.
That'll cover the food for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, if I'm not hearing any pushback, you know, make those quick changes and we'll probably bring it back to the next council meeting.
Okay.
I could see where we would go ahead and we could adopt those changes to that franchise agreement.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.
Moving right along, committee updates. Councilman Robinson,
None.
Councilman Boone.
Mr. Lee, don't we have a harbor board meeting this week?
Yes.
Yes. Thursday,
Yes,
4:30.
yes.
That's on, basically, so we're not whispering, but the Harbor Board meeting will be Thursday at 4:30, once I found that out. I'm sorry? They changed it to Wednesday? I say they changed it. We normally have it on Thursday.
Well, look,
I've heard both.
it is Wednesday. Okay.
Then, never mind. The Harbor Board meeting will be meeting Wednesday. This week, Wednesday, at the library
2 days.
in 2 days at 4:30. Is that correct? They hope they didn't change that, because that'll be a hard time making anything before 4:30.
It's the Dale Champ's room.
Dale Champ's room. Change it to Dale Champ's room. It's always good.
Any other? Any others?
Lord, no. I had a hard enough time getting through that one.
Councilman Brown?
I'm sorry?
Not at the library this week, according to email. It's the Dale Champ's room.
Okay, it'll be at the Dale Champ's room. Disregard only listen to me this time. Anyway, we'll meet there. If it's not there, we'll call up the library and see if anybody's over there. We'll bring them over here. That's it.
Yeah, the EAC met last week, had a good meeting. The EAC was presented the proposed budget items that would be funded through the donation from the city, from the Baldwin County Board of Education, that trickled from the principals. And after reviewing it, the EAC felt like probably going to take a step back. Still ask for the same amount of funding, but at this point, they do not have anything specific that funding will go to. A couple of items that are thoughts that will be coming forward in the near future, but at this time, they're going to kind of back up from what they did last year. They feel like they hadn't been getting the necessary response from the county as far as accountability. You know, the money's been going to what it's supposed to go to, but they're just not getting any kind of data back supporting what the funding's been doing. So,
Yeah, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't, just address that a little bit, Robert. It's I had the question posed to me is that are we, taking the recommendations, and every year that we've funded them, we've taken the EAC's recommendations, and recommendations have changed every year. And I thought that last recommendation was going to be the path forward, and that's what they were going to stick with. Now, I'm willing to listen to their recommendations, but I just want the public to know, too, that we've taken the EAC's recommendations and funded what they wanted each year. And if they're talking about even looking a different direction, there was the study that was done, and the EAC looked at that study and took their recommendations from that study, and last year it was professional development. And it took some doing, but I think we resigned ourselves to the fact, at one time we resisted paying for professional development, and then we resigned ourselves to that's what the experts say is needed to enhance the education here, then that's what we'll do. So, and just kind of in the for what it's worth category, if we change again, when do we have 2 years of doing the same thing?
well, and I guess that's the EAC's point, is they're kind of caught in the middle of a political, it's whether it's a Baldwin County School Board under a new superintendent or whether it's a new council or what, but they're getting told this is what we're going to spend it on one year and then the next. And yeah, they bring the recommendations to the council, but at the same time, they've got to have cooperation from all three parties to make something happen. And when that starts breaking down, then that's why we're taking a step back as a committee to reevaluate how to move forward. And they believe the Acrobus study is a path forward, but it's trying to get all parties involved on how that's best going to be implemented.
I really thought that they were on the same page, and I know that they were looking at one set of scores, standardized test scores, and they changed it, and they were going to another set
of methods of testing.
Scores, and it seems like we can't year after year look back and there's no benchmark.
Right.
The mark just keeps moving.
I think there is a benchmark as of last year. So,
right.
From that last study.
Right, I agree with you, but if we don't go enough years of investing to see if we move the needle and they change the benchmark, what do we?
Right, I don't know.
What do you do? I don't know the answer. I don't have an answer to
I think that
that,
was
but just an observation.
a
Well,
big
the-
study that happened that I know that Corey Young was involved with, the benchmark that they have in place, I guess, in last year.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the benchmark, but what was funded last year was not the direction the county was wanting to go this year. Which would, like you're saying, back to kind of repeat the process 2 years in a row is not where the EAC was steered by the county.
Okay. Any other committee?
That's it.
Okay. Councilman Conyers?
I've got a couple things to bring up. One, I guess, would fall under the heading of the Environmental Committee, although I haven't met with them. This wasn't a directive from them, and I will bring it up at the next meeting. But Councilman Brown and I met with Mobile Baykeeper. I saw Casey and Cade slide in. And if it's all right with y'all, I'd love to invite them up for just a few minutes.
We got time.
Okay. If y'all wouldn't mind coming up. Basically, we were talking about testing the water, primarily Fly Creek area, but some other locations throughout the city, and they had presented a proposal of testing 12 different locations for 12 weeks, and wanted to have them provide a little more information about that, if you don't mind.
I'll give you big picture, and then if you have detailed questions, Cade is the knowledgeable one in the room on all the specifics. What we know is that we had one spill on Flat Creek, and then we got asked by that community, the folks who live on Flat Creek, to test it regularly. So we've been doing that. They've helped to the community members have helped to fund those tests for us, which are a little on the we're on the spendy side. We got it down a little bit because we finally got a piece of equipment that makes our lives a lot easier to be able to test. We continue to find high levels of Enterococcus, which is the parameter that tells you you've got bacteria in the creek, but we haven't had more spills. So we need to figure out what the problem is. So we've laid out a plan that will enable us to test closely, regularly, go back and forth and see everything to really figure out what it is not, where it is not coming from, as well as where it is coming from. So we need to know if it's septic, if we have a leaking line in the area, starting with Fly Creek and really just doing as close a dive in as possible. We have the equipment to do the sampling for Enterococcus, but we also have a fluorometer, which helps you figure out if it's human or if it's animal. It's a brightness indicator, which is bleaches in toilet paper or other materials or phosphates from detergents. So we know how to do it. We've got an easy plan for how to make it go forward. We're proposing 3 months worth of a test so we can make sure we cover all the time that we need to, rainstorms, regular days, and what else am I leaving out?
I think that's pretty good coverage. I think there's a few other parameters that we can test for, but those are the bacteria and the fluorometer are the two main ones.
So it's a reasonable, we think, we're pretty cheap. I think if you were using one of the scientific organizations around here, it would be a lot more expensive. But this should give us a really good understanding of what our problem is, and then hopefully be able to find a solution very quickly.
Can you?
Go ahead, ma'am.
I was just going to say to talk to Richard Peterson as well, because we do have in the budget, plans for this, and that's just something I was hoping to talk to y'all about when y'all wanted to talk more about the budget, but that's in the budget.
What, I want to know more details. You said 12 locations, and you said focusing on Fly Creek, but what if we found out it was coming from the bay and going into Fly Creek? How wide of an area? Can you just give me a description of
Definitely can. We've had some of the higher bacteria levels come back on pretty rapidly falling tides, so I think that definitely we've had some of the source coming from in Fly Creek, and I understand that obviously when you have that rising tide, that can cause that. But the 12 locations are concentrated more on the area below Scenic 98 because that area is more populated. There's likely to be more septic and sewage line in that area, and then spread out as you get above Scenic 98. So I think, and I've got a map, and I will first apologize for not having brought.
When you say below
copies.
Scenic and above, you mean on that creek then?
Yes, sir.
To the bridge,
On Fly
above
Creek.
the bridge or
Yes,
below
sir.
the bridge?
Yes, sir, exactly. On Fly Creek, in the creek itself. All of the sampling would be in Fly Creek. And so just the main idea being to isolate. If you have a certain sample show up hot every time, high bacteria levels, you're getting these optical brighteners that are only found in human wastewater, and everything above there never shows up hot, then you can hopefully isolate, working your way back. That's the thought process. And like I say, I apologize for not having a printed copy. I printed a few and then my birthday was yesterday, so our staff gave me a quick surprise on the way out the door, and I was like, I gotta go, and left those on the printer, so my apologies for that, but we can email you copies of that plan.
Casey,
What we want to do is really figure out what we've got in Flag Creek. And if we find that at the mouth of Flag Creek or near the marina, that's the only place we've got a problem, then we'll figure out what the next steps would be from there. So it should be a really, we kind of want to just study area 1 and see if there's a problem, and if it's not, go to area 2 and really study the whole of Flag Creek. If it works, if what we do works well and we find out what our problems are in Flag Creek, then we can look at other areas for additional needs. So, but I think this is a really neat, comprehensive, and likely to include the community way to figure out what your problem is. And fairly inexpensively, I think, too.
can you give us that cost?
$6,500.
That's 144 tests.
Over how long?
3 months.
12 weeks, 12 locations. And my thought for going and sitting down with Casey and Cade was that we've got some pretty substantial proposals on long-term infrastructure upgrades, and I think we certainly need to do that. But if we find out that instead of a $30 million overhaul, we really need a $10 million overhaul and to fix some septic systems, then I'd rather know that before we dive off into the deep end and spend a ton of money. So I think isolating it and knowing exactly what is causing it would help.
I would love for you not to need to spend $30 million, but.
You kind of
Yeah.
need to look at all, because it's
Right.
not just,
Yeah.
it's about the growth too. And the plan that Richard has put together is inclusive. It's talking about the ASAP, the spills. He's been testing himself, taking upon it himself, but y'all would definitely need to work together on that, because he spent a lot of time working with engineers to do the test, to do the proposal of what the needs are.
We'd be happy to. And I will say, too, we want to commend the city of Fairhope for looking at planning as well as immediate fixes. I think that is, too often what we do is wait for the perfect plan to do any kind of solution finding or solution implementation. And I think that what the city and the mayor is, what y'all are setting forward with actually doing some fixes now, as well as studying and outlining a plan for long-term, it's excellent. And we wish every city would do the same thing.
Council, so I think that we should review what Richard has put together and the mayor's put together, and maybe weigh that against what Mobile Baykeeper's proposing, and I would be prepared to come back at the next work session and talk about, maybe have some formulated opinion so we can get something on an agenda to move forward. It could be one or the other, both, all above. Just have an opinion, I would say. All right. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for
Thank you.
coming.
Jack,
Appreciate
I'm
it.
on the environmental committee, and there's at least 2 or 3 members that would be willing to sample and do some analysis, so. we can
Okay.
bring that up to the next meeting.
I'll do that.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, another thing I wanted to bring up just before the group. I was contacted about the Mystic Mutts of Revelry parade application. I know they submitted an application. They typically parade the Saturday, same day as KOER. Their application, from what I understand, was declined because we actually have an ordinance on the books that states that you cannot have 2 parades the same day, and I guess it just wasn't
Same
being
week, actually, I think it says, but.
well, for whatever reason, I guess it hadn't been enforced in the past however many years they've been doing the dog parade on the same day. My personal feeling is I think it works well to have them both on that Saturday. It's the Saturday directly before Mardi Gras. People have come in town for the dog parade. They tend to stay most of the afternoon and evening until the KOER parade. But to my knowledge, the only reason it was declined was due to the fact that that ordinance is on the books, and I thought we should discuss that and see if y'all want to either look at maybe tweaking the ordinance or granting them a waiver, or if anyone has any other thoughts or objections. Is there any other reason to not doing it the same day? But I just wanted to bring that up.
Does that ordinance specify as to what counts as a parade?
Yeah, best of my knowledge, it doesn't. I read that some time ago. I believe that it was intended to not have two Mardi Gras parades. If I had to guess, it was, it was adopted in the early 90s. It was probably trying to prevent competing Mardi Gras organizations from coming in, because if you look at all the subheadings on the ordinance, it says none, and then it goes through and talks about throws and floats and everything's float, which leans heavily towards a Mardi Gras parade, but it does not specifically spell out Mardi Gras parade, so it could be interpreted that it it could be any parade. I think that if you read it, as an attorney, you would say, well, it's not specific enough. It might. Lynn, what do you want to add?
There are extenuating circumstances in this case. As I understand it, the date that they applied for, there's also a 5K race being run that day, which means closing down the city from 9 o'clock in the morning until after 4 o'clock, the streets, Fairhope Avenue. Whereas this one, if they moved it to another Saturday and held it at 1 o'clock, then we're limited with the period of time that the streets are closed for that parade.
Who allowed a 5K that same day then?
I don't know. It came across my desk as a 5K and.
Has it been approved yet? Or you don't?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's just that they were trying to
I believe
juggle
that-
two events that were going to end up
Yeah.
tying up the city in its entirety.
Well, I was going to mention too, when we met about this, is considering to move the dog parade up a little bit, have a portion of that route the same, so you wouldn't have to take down the barricades twice. I mean, it was, I think, I'm not sure if he's here, but anyway, in the meeting it was Arthur and Sherry Swartz, and they came up with a lot of good ideas.
You also
Allowing
haven't.
us to keep it on the same Saturday.
Yeah,
not
keep
keep
it on the
all-
same day, and it would kind of encourage people to come a little bit early but stay, and
You also
but
need-
less labor.
You also need to look at your ordinances, and as far as ridiculous as it is, we have an ordinance that says we cannot have a parade at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So basically, you can't have it until the evening time.
Okay, we can change any of that, so.
Any of
all
that
right,
can be
thank you.
changed,
Thank
just
you.
so you've got conflicting things going
Yeah, I
on.
mean,
Thank you.
I would, I hadn't met with the Haven, but ever since I've lived in Fairhope, we've done it the same day. It's been always the same day as KOER, and if they're wanting to keep it that way, I'd like to keep it that way if we can. There might be some accommodations we can make if it starts an hour later than maybe it normally did, if that'll help us facilitate the street flow a little better.
We didn't have barricades before, but they feel like it's needed now because it's gotten so much bigger. So that was the thought process with the labor.
I think last year they may have even, I think Alex Group, the downtown merchants may have even shut down Fairhope Avenue from Church to Section in an effort not to have to remove all the barricades. And they kind of shut that down for that little 1 or 2 hour block in
You know what,
between the
they-
parades.
They did. They had sort of a Mardi Gras block party, I think is what they called it.
So, I mean, something like that could possibly
the
be another
wonderful work
option.
that my wife does do.
That's right.
Alex, are you listening?
Councilman Boone?
As much of a dog lover as I am, to be quite frank about it, I don't care what's going on that day. Dog parade's running that day, as far as I'm concerned. That's all, whatever changes we need to make them.
I know you're not a dog lover, Robert, but what do you think? That's a joke for those of you who don't know Robert, since he drives around with a dog in his truck 24/7.
The dog parade must go on.
Now, I will make it unanimous that I don't think that there's, and I even thought about the fact that if you do move it, are you adding another attraction to the city? And I think that the synergy between the two brings in more than it does if you have separate events, because you get people to come in early and they stay all day, is the way I see it. I just think it's a wonderful thing, and we just change the ordinance, whatever we have to do, give a waiver and make it happen that day. Mayor, if we have to move barricades one way or other, slightly change a route, this or that, make it a little bit easier, but at the same time, I don't want, quite frankly, I don't want to hear the crews say, well, that's too hard to move these barricades or do this or that. We have a lot of volunteers
It
that'll
was
help out
having
with
to
that.
put them up, take them down, put them up
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
It was,
Put 'em
they
up, leave 'em
determined
up.
that, yeah, they determined that we do need barricades for the dog parade, for safety.
I think so.
So that's why we talked about the
Put them up and leave them out.
proximity of the time.
All right, so I guess, Clerk, can I ask you to bring out that ordinance and let us take a look at it and see what we need to do to, whether it needs to be a waiver?
Actually, there's two ordinances. One for 1 o'clock also.
Oh, is that we'll look them up.
It's a separate ordinance.
We'll have it at 2.
We'll check both of them.
All right. We can have it at 1 and change it if that's what they want to do. All right. Anything else? Councilman
That was
Cummings?
it. Those were the two main things.
Okay.
Jack, I've got something else. The Financial Advisory Committee met Thursday.
Okay.
For the first time, kind of just laid out their blueprint of what they're going to be trying to help the city with. We need to appoint a council liaison to that committee.
Okay. We have a financial advisory, and let you the term for that. For finance and audit is myself and Jimmy, and I have plenty to do. I might want to consider Jimmy being the one that represents us on that.
I don't mind doing it. I've got a ton going on as well. I don't mind doing it. Would we want to have more than one? Robert mentioned he might be willing. I wouldn't mind if he took the first shift, if we did it in
I would
shifts.
Robert had a lot to do with getting this put together. I would recommend that Robert be the one that takes the first shift in this as the advisory role to the finance committee.
And I don't mind splitting it with you, so you're not just have it for the whole 4 years.
That would be good.
3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
Can I
You're
make
kind of
a,
optimistic there, aren't you, Jimmy?
Not
he
that
can do 2.5
optimistic.
years and you'll do 6 months anyway.
Yeah.
I do have a recommendation. The Finance Advisory Committee is only going to meet once a month. And so with council only meeting twice a month, if there are things that, the resolution states that if there's something outside the budget, you want their recommendation before it goes to council. That's going to slow down an already very inefficient process.
Let me address that. I know that's a concern of yours. That doesn't, we don't have to wait for that if we have something that needs to be brought before the council. I mean, while we would desire that, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all that, that every time we have a need for something that we have to wait for that. So if there's something urgent, just bring that to the council or have staff
I would say
bring it to
anything that
council.
we need, it's not urgent, but it should be a sense of urgency as far as process, just because you only do meet twice a month. And most of the things that they're going to be meeting on are things that you are going to need to decide as councilmen. And the way I'm seeing it, look, I want all of the help, that we can get, but anything that slows down what we're already dealing with, again, for the process, and department heads can speak to this, is going to be very detrimental to the city. And we do need more efficient ways to process things, not additional steps. So, I mean, this is a council, duty.
Right.
And that's what people, voted y'all in to do, is to make decisions. And the budget, they're not going to meet again until November. And I'm not sure if y'all are waiting on their recommendation on the budget, but there's just 2 weeks have gone by now, and I haven't heard from any of y'all. I'm here willing and able to meet with you to go over questions.
Yeah, like I said, I just want to reiterate what Jack said. If it's most of the expenditures are handled during the budget process, and if there's something, an emergency, like I said, we're not looking to the Financial Advisory Committee for every penny that's spent in the city. So if it's outside the budget, continue to bring it forward in the, when we meet.
Yeah, and my hope would be that kind of the process takes care of itself to where the financial advisory, it's just getting started now, but as things are submitted, there should be some flow where their meetings, which might be the first Thursday of every month, come right before ours, which is the second Monday, and that
But
there's
it's still
some-
once a month. And
Or whenever they deem this, they can
Yeah,
call
but,
special
but
meetings.
if, I mean, in the event that there's something that needs to be addressed that comes up at the second meeting of the month when they're not scheduled to meet until the next month, we can address that without their recommendation. But my thought is it's better to be right than fast. And so I'd rather.
But that's what we count on y'all to do, is make right decisions. I mean, that's part of being a city council person, is making financial decisions. And to appoint that duty to a committee that was not elected by the people, not hired by me, to me is a disservice to the city.
So we
And-
should get rid of the planning commission as well? They're
No,
not
I
elected
think-
by the
I
people
think-
that make recommendations?
No, I think there's not a step before the planning commission. I say we need an advisory committee. I think that is one of the most important committees to the city. I think the last part of that resolution makes the city more inefficient. And if y'all are too busy to make those decisions, then the burden of that advisory needs to be on you, not me and our city
Who said we were
employees.
too busy to make those decisions?
No, I don't know if you're too busy. I don't know why you would wait to have a recommendation from them before you would make a decision. Whatever that reason is, that burden should be on city council, not on me as mayor. I work every day doing my job, and not on the city employees. You have to understand, when it takes 6 months to just go through the procurement process, that's not normal, and that's where we are right now. As a city, that's where we are. And I'm hoping that council will help make that more
Is that
efficient.
council's fault?
Absolutely.
Did it take 6 months for procurement?
Because there's so many steps that we add as a city to the procurement process over and above the state statute.
Well, one of the things that we did write in, it was one of the new things that we wrote in to the Finance Committee was to look at the procurement process. I had that written in large part due to your complaints about the obstacles, and so I think that that's something that they can take a look at, being business people, and make recommendations to us to possibly improve that process. And but as far as our processes go, they've evolved over time for various reasons, and there was essentially no changes to that Finance Committee as it was.
I'm only talking about the last part of the paragraph that basically states, all anticipated or requested expenditures for capital purchases, matching funds for grants, or expenditures not included in the current fiscal budget, you're always going to have those, be submitted to the Finance Advisory Committee for analysis and recommendations before being submitted to the City Council for consideration. This extra
That
step.
was verbatim from the 2009 resolution that formed that's verbatim from 2009.
Well, then I recommend that the Finance Advisory Committee meet once a week, or y'all decide to meet more than twice a month. Because, like I said, I wasn't really prepared to go into detail, but I can show you what the process looks like right now to get anything done in the city. But I'd rather it come from the department heads, the ones that are living it.
I think that it's going to take some time for everybody to get used to all that. We have lots of new department heads, lots of new people, and once they get used to how long it takes to get through the process, that they'll figure out that you got to get started earlier and find ways to expedite it. But that's why we have it in there to be looked at. Do you have anything else, Councilman?
No.
I've got two things to discuss. The marina has been a topic of discussion, and we have been trying to expedite getting the marina. We'll be taking it over in less than a week. We've been trying to expedite the takeover of the marina, and to that end, one of the key items that we need in operation is the fuel dock and also the waste pump out station. So I have a resolution that I would like to walk onto the agenda tonight. Probably going to talk to you, Lynn, and Sherry Lee, maybe right after this work session, and see if you have a number to fill in there. It's going to be authorizing the mayor to select some professional services provider to help us with some environmental requirements that we need to put in new fuel tanks and a containment system, which we may or may not need. And also, we need to talk about getting the pump out station. And the reason that we want to expedite it is that we would like to have that operational. It's very aggressive, but like to have that operational by the end of the month so that we don't miss the looper traffic. If we do miss the looper traffic, it might be a year or 2 or 3 before we can attract them again. So with all that we have going on, with piers that have been lost in the storm and things such as that, it is, to be an operational marina, you need to have fuel available, and you need to have pump out stations available. One bright spot of that is we will be able to buy this fuel off our state bid list and resell it to people. So that's something that you may or may not have thought of a way that we would generate revenue there. But I think that to provide that for the people there is critical. Do you have any questions about that? Lynn, what am I leaving out?
Correct, President Burrell. We are not taking over the marina, we are taking it back.
We're taking it back.
We want to
Okay.
change that language.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Completely.
I do have a question for us non-voters. What is a looper?
A looper is someone who travels around the eastern United States.
They loop in and out.
Typically what you do is you will go up the eastern seaboard and you'll cut down the Hudson River, go through the Great Lakes, come down the Mississippi, Ohio, Tennessee, Tom Bigby waterway, basically come out in Mobile Bay and wind up back in wherever you started. Maybe typically they'll start in Florida. And there's just there are hundreds of boaters that follow this, and it's desired to be a stop on the trail, and Fairhope is a stop on the trail. They gas up. They're typically in large boats, and we sell them fuel, and then they pump out their waste. If we have a boat yard there, it's quite common for them to have repairs made at our boat yard, so that's critical function as well. So
It's not our boat yard.
what?
You said our boat yard.
Well, it's not ours, the one that's in our city.
Ours, the one that we're going to be supporting.
Yeah, the one that we have in Fairhope. It's
All right, thank you.
Do y'all want to do department head updates before the hurricane? 'Cause-
I want to go through one more
Okay, because I know
topic.
they have a lot to say.
Well, we'll get to that in just a minute.
Okay.
So I did want to touch on the budget. And I've been reading it over. I know that I've met with Robert for 3, 4, 5 hours now, maybe formulating questions to ask. But I would say we will more than likely start having some more budget discussions. It may be some special call meetings to get questions put out there to the mayor and staff to get answers to these. My personal opinion is I have a lot of questions about the budget right now, but today's meeting is not the day to bring them out. So
I'm
look
happy to meet
forward.
with y'all too. It might be easier to go just line by line,
It might be. I mean, and
know,
that's how
and
I'm
Jill and I
going
can
through it.
do that.
Why I'm going through it now. So, Mayor, I would encourage you not to judge the fact that you may not have heard from anybody yet. I mean, like I know myself as I'm trying to get through a lot of it instead of doing it piecemeal so that I can get out most of my questions at one time. And that's what I'm doing. So don't take a lack of communication as lack of looking over the budget. I haven't been through all of it. I mean, it is a complex budget. So the one thing I would ask, Mayor, is that you would allow us the opportunity to speak to staff and department heads. I've been informed that you want department heads to speak to council members only with you or Jill. And
I just said I encourage that because last time when y'all didn't engage with me, things were cut that I felt like affected other areas. Since I've included the revenue and where these things will be paid for, I want to make sure that you know that before you consider cutting it. And, you know,
Point
I
taken.
wanted, you know, the department heads to give y'all the extensive budget that they're requesting, and then I think you can see that I've tapered it down a lot, and we've forecasted what we need based on priorities, and we made sure that everything that's in the budget can be paid for, and how it can be paid for.
Well, we're gonna, I don't know how we're gonna increase income by millions and millions of dollars. I look forward to seeing that, but I saw millions and millions of dollars in increased expenses, so I will bring those questions to you, give you an opportunity to answer how those are gonna be paid for. Before we get to department head updates, council, do you have anything else? Okay, we'll move on to department head updates. Who wants to go first? I want to hear about the damages from the storm. Can someone speak to that?
I think both Richards and Sherry Lee can probably summarize them the best because they know the whole overall, because of all the meetings and stuff, so.
I'll be glad to start.
I'm sorry that, I'm like looking out there and Richard's right here.
That's our new public works director, for those of you that don't know.
I'm introducing him during the agenda, but
Just jump right up
Richard
there,
Johnson.
Listen, might as well start trial by fire.
I like your style.
Council, thank y'all for having me. I mean, it's been, last week was relatively calm. This week has started off exciting. The biggest thing we've jumped
Welcome home.
Well, thank you. Biggest issue we started this morning, starting the damage assessment. The key controlling factor is that every jurisdiction, county, the state is compiling a number that's going to be submitted through FEMA that hopefully will trip the authorization and declaration of the event, which is going to put public assistance into play. And public assistance is a very good thing because at a minimum it's going to pay 75 cents on the dollar of every repair related to storm damage. And if Alabama EMA does their normal contribution of 12.5 cents, then all of a sudden we're at 87.50 cents on the dollar of reimbursable on our public assistance. As you're all aware, the shoreline is where the majority of the damage occurred. We've already visited every infrastructure that we have there and at least done an initial damage assessment. Just on the first 4 southern piers, and including the piers at the boat ramp, we're already in excess of about $150,000 worth of damage, and we haven't included those that are north of there. We'll have that tomorrow morning buttoned up, and those numbers are being fed northward as well to through the state AMA. And it looks like just about the majority of our public park piers have taken some form of damage, some much more extensive than others. There's no rhyme or reason. On the North Beach, the 2 piers that are literally side by side, one is essentially destroyed, the other is completely intact. Explain that, I can't, but that's just kind of the gambit of the storm. The Fairhope Pier, as far as the concrete structure, it is sound. We had some damage to the marina piers and docks, as well as the finger piers to the south. Relatively minor, that's still going to have to be taken care of and shored up before it's safe for use, but we did get the main pier back open, and we still have some issues on the kind of colonnade on each side of it where the walkways are, especially on the south side, had some undermining. Relatively simple fix. That'll be work that we'll do in-house and file for reimbursement, so that'll be a that'll be a plus for us because there won't really be a hard dollar expense to that. That's a consumable labor and equipment that we already have as our week-to-week budget allows for. So, but that's kind of the real quick view of it. Biggest thing is that I hope the next time that we're before you, we've already met with our FEMA reps, that the public assistance money has been authorized, and we're looking for authorization to go out for bids for the repairs of the piers and things of that nature, and be able to tell you exactly what we're looking at as far as total cost and exposure to repair them. Thank you.
Questions for Richard, council?
I have one. Would it help or benefit? I noticed down on Highway 1, the piers that were raised from the ground level are raised 3 or 4 feet going out over. They were all intact. Not that it would help with every storm, but with these, I would call that one a minor hurricane, but.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that even on our localized shoreline here, that if you notice newer piers that were, for example, stayed high and then didn't drop until they got out to the service end of the pier, tend to fare much better. The biggest challenge we're going to have with the PA is that majority of the pilings are existing, and they will be usable to build back upon, and you can't make them taller. But absolutely, one of the things, Sherry Lee, we're going to press real hard about talking mitigation with FEMA, and at least ask them to consider looking at a through-flow decking to decrease the chances of the uplift during the wave and surge action. They may say no, but they always can say yes too. And if they do agree to mitigation, that means they up the dollars to bring it to a little higher standard to make it a more sustainable infrastructure for these type of events. I would imagine, just talking with Arthur, that most of these piers will now be on their third claim in 15 years if you consider that there was claims associated with Ivan, Katrina, and now Nate. That's a good argument to make, that 3 claims in 15 years, some looking at some mitigation to make them more sustainable may be money well spent by FEMA.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I got a question. What's the thoughts on the bulkhead there south of the municipal pier, the wooden structure with the kind of concrete integrated with it?
We spent some time looking at it. I mean, and as I understand it, that noticeable cant that you see, especially as you get to the south, has been present for a while. This is not related to what's happened this past weekend. No doubt, looking at the way that is built with the old tongue and groove concrete panels with the wood revetment built in front of it, we've probably got our money's worth out of that seawall. And that's something we're going to at least be looking at to give you some recommendations. It may be something that if it was aesthetically acceptable to the mayor and the council, to look at some rock revetment to actually shore that up, to expand that lifespan, especially if you go with the riprap that has a better aesthetic than just the granite you normally see. Or even look at what would we be entailed to go back and sheet pile it, or some other vinyl sheet pile, which is a good look. But those tend to be very expensive options. The riprap or some type of revetment in front of it is the least costly that will give you a extension of that service life.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other department heads? Joe?
Well, the short and sweet, I believe we dodged a bullet. We had expectations of multiple outages, but in the end, we wound up with 6 localized outages. So we dodged a bullet. Thank the Lord.
Absolutely.
Next.
Well, as I was a supervisor on call for this storm, it seems like somehow I usually wind up getting them, but I'd like to take and thank all the city employees for a job well done. I know I handled multiple calls from the police department. They were just as fast as they were coming in. Different calls from, I got brushed down, I got a garbage can that needed to be picked up, so it was just handing those calls off to the proper department. But the Fairhope Volunteer Fire Department was on call too, and sometimes they get left out, so I want to tell them thank you. These men and women that we've got were there at the stations ready to respond. But as usual, the city employees in this city took care of its citizens. We had a few little minor things here and there happen. Richard, you want me to address the County Road 1? The County Road 1, I know we caught that, and part of our plan is because of the piers that they have out into the bay. That section, when it particularly because it drops off in elevation, we have a hard time getting to some of the valves where they're at to shut them off. So we have it in our plan at a certain time to shut those off. However, in this case, we didn't totally shut it off. We reduced the flow to them. And then when the storm passed, we was able to reassess everything. And as of this morning, we've got it back up 100%. So it was never really down totally. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. We were able to redo some things and try to still take care of the citizens. So once again, thanks for all the city employees for a job well done.
So, Dan, with all those piers that were lost down on County Road 1, we're not losing water down there?
Yes, they were.
We're selling a lot of water.
When we went after the storm and went back down there, we had one valve that we left cracked open enough to keep water flowing. And when it was flying through there with Gary. So we knew right then that we needed to leave things alone and wait a day. We went and checked the pressure, and pressure was up a little higher than we had expected, and then we went back down our day, and it was back to normal, which told us that the folks that were losing water had gotten there and gotten it shut off at their house. People leave, or they don't think about that water out on the pier, and when it snaps and breaks, here you already got 20, 30 gallons a minute, and as it takes with several homes, you take 100 homes down there, you can lose 4 million gallons in a heartbeat. So the thing is to try to keep water and protect the infrastructure, and that's exactly what we were trying to do.
So just to reiterate, you're saying that County Road 1, sometimes you can't get to the valve to shut it off?
That's correct. Well, the
So
valves
that's
are
the reason
local.
Highway 1 and not all of St. 98.
Well, the plan is if it gets too bad, we can back up and continue coming up 98 to shut, if we have to be able to get to those things. So the plan is first County Road 1, and then we can back up from there, because you drop off another close to 4 foot in elevation. And I took pictures along those things, and I gave them to Mr. Peterson of all of the debris and things that were in our way. I mean, we went through water a foot deep, and you imagine what it was at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm sure it was a lot deeper than that. So that's our plan that we put in place right after Hurricane Ivan. When it come through, we literally had to walk from County Road 1 and 98 all the way to the end walking, because we couldn't get to the meters as we had turned things back on. So we're walking, just bending, doing whatever we do to get the water shut off so we get the water reestablished down there. So it's kind of it's just another way that we use to try to protect the system.
The integrity of the whole system, but there's
Right.
also, y'all are talking about a plan that you wouldn't have to do this in the future either. If you want to quickly, just so people won't worry about it in the future. Just come up with a solution.
Dan.
Dan.
I mean, I guess I'll let you. I'm still interested in the water tank.
I'm sorry?
Painting of the water tank.
Bids are being opened in the morning.
That'll work.
I hope it works.
Hey, I want to address your question about moving that substation. I don't have any interest in moving that substation to paint that water tower at once every 15 or 20 years. And, I mean, they carry insurance, and, it may be some kind of.
Yeah, and it's not
small
about
risk,
the contractor, it's not about the substation, it's about the customers that can be affected by it.
Yeah,
That's the issue. It has nothing to do with.
I don't think that risk is that high.
That's fine.
If they protect it and do what they're, supposed to do. Can I say it wouldn't happen, but the chances of it knocking something out for any length of time to me are slim compared to moving a substation to paint the water tower. I couldn't see it. I just couldn't see it.
Well, I'm sorry?
When we got to that point,
Yeah.
never mind.
And that's fine. I mean, we'll take our chances and hope everything works out, and it may. But, I mean, you're gonna paint it again eventually.
15, 20 years.
And you're gonna upgrade the substation one day, and you're gonna need more room when you upgrade the substation one day, so, you take care of all of it at one time, and it's a little bit easier to accomplish, but we're painting the tank, we're getting bids tomorrow, and we hope for the best in that. The County Road 1 thing, from experiences with Ivan, is kind of how the determination evolved as to shutting down the water. And we put it out well in advance so that people would understand on County Road 1 from between 98 and the end of the road that we're looking at shutting the water off at 5:30 Saturday. And this was when the latest projection prior to that was a Category 1, possibly Category 2 storm hitting somewhere close to the Mississippi-Alabama line perhaps. And then as it fell off and started looking like it was going further west, Dan and I looked at maybe just cracking the valve, turning one valve off completely, cracking the other valve in case we did lose some of the water due to the piers that were out over the bay, and continue to have water. We also asked them to look when water rose above their grinder pump vent to turn off the breaker to the grinder pump. And I can tell you that when we went out there Sunday morning, there was one phase of power available through EMC. The other two phases were out. So our lift station was out. Our lift station is 3-phase power. And there was some of those houses connected to a single phase of that three-phase line were pumping, and we reported the overflow. We cornered EMC out there that same time, and that we waited around until they were able to get power back on. And you could tell a big difference in the flow coming out of the wet well of the lift station, with the other two phases of power being hot to the rest of the buildings. And then going through the whole thing, you know, I mean, we could potentially put a generator at that lift station, although it's vulnerable to being flooded too. You know, the ideal thing would be to be able to let people know power will be out at the lift station, and you need to, you know, turn your breaker off to your grinder pump, because the water over the road was, like Dan was saying, 8 to 12 inches, and you could see water in every yard where these grinder pumps sit, and we're just pumping bay water into the sewer system. And that's probably what happened with the lift station on Twin Beach Road having an overflow, because it couldn't keep up with all that flow once the power came on. So, you know, and the people were upset with us, and that's why we backed off a little bit. But the plan we will have going forward is we may put a bypass between the valve and the line, and we may put a smaller size pressure regulator and regulate pressure down to maybe 40 pounds or 35 pounds, and limit our risk, because our risk is not about losing that system on County Road 1. Our risk is the leaks that come from the damage down there cause everything in town to go down, which affects the hospital and all the people that are on, you know, in Fairhope. And I just don't think that's the prudent way to operate the system. And you know, that's just my opinion. If you think it's different, y'all tell me it's different. We'll leave everything wide open. But that's the opinion I'm taking. And I think we can come up with a contingency plan for a Cat 3, Cat 4 storm and back ourselves up on toward the hotel, and maybe do a similar type technique there. So we'll always be able to give pressure, so if there is no big problem, they'll have water. But if there is a big problem, they'll be very limited in what water supply they get. And we'll save our system, you know, for the people that are a little bit more cautious and in town, you know, trying to ride out a storm.
Questions?
Where is that lift station down on?
It's just past Muller Point Park. It'll be on the left-hand side, just past Muller Point Park.
Okay.
It's hard to see now with all the boards around.
Yes.
Yeah, there are a ton of boards out there. And one other thing we had, and Joe didn't mention it, but we did have crews available from Florida to help restore electric if we needed it. Awesome. And I don't know if y'all heard the information we provided over the radio or not, but we had that under the Electric Cities Mutual Assistance Agreement.
Okay.
But yeah, you know, we had people working through the night. Johnny Keller and Tom and Tim Manuel stayed at the wastewater plant all night, and they were monitoring, watching, and trying to keep up with things. And as Joe said, we dodged a bullet. I think it could have been a lot worse, and it worked out pretty well. Mm-hmm. So, thank you.
Right. Mayor, thank you for your support, too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Any other department heads? Particular? Robert?
Yes, sir. Fortunately, we had no damage. We did go down on County Road 1 today, though, and clear away some debris around our regulator stations. So we've had this happen in the past. When they start cleanup, believe it or not, that's when they get tore up because they can't see them in the yard. So we did do that. Took a half a day and done about 3 miles of where the high pressure is. But other than that, we didn't have any calls at all. So we were very fortunate. And on the Marina 2, we do have Tracy from Davidson Oil coming by in the morning to brief us on fuel tanks.
Okay. All right.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Robert.
You want to go? Go ahead.
No, you go.
No, you go ahead.
No, after you. After you.
So I think our emergency operations plan worked really well. We had a lot of dress rehearsals moving, you know, from the time that we enacted it with John Saraceno. So I think that was the good thing. The other good thing, and Richard touched on it, was that some of the grants we've been applying for, some of these resilience grants, I mean, this is perfect timing because we will be able to use some of this funding and some of the technical assistance and other things that we have coming through the pipeline and with FEMA, and I'll certainly work with EPA and FEMA to try to get mitigation dollars in place so that we can build back better and so we can integrate things like a living shoreline or green infrastructure, things that will help from us having to deal with this erosion. Other types of things like the piers and the structural things, I defer to Richard and these guys on, but there are lots of things we can put in place to do a little bit better and suffer less damage from a Cat 1 storm like this. So to me, it's exciting in some ways. I mean, it's never exciting to have a storm. I think our communications went pretty well, although I don't think it's perfected. We have to figure that out. Communicating with the public we did radio and television, and Richard and I went out in the middle of the storm and did WABF and then updated the next morning. And, we're up all night just taking calls, and the intercommunication went very, very well with staff. I mean, we just were very well coordinated. So I think all of that was good. It was a really good low-level storm to have for us to perfect our process. And I say that just as my role on the emergency management team. I think it went well. Wayne, you've got 6 minutes.
Very short.
Okay.
Just want to mention that the moratorium has expired. We will be preparing a report. We've been working with Lynn and preparing a report for everyone so they can see what we've done and the proposals we're making and have made. So that'll be coming out shortly. It expired October the 5th, I believe, and so the December application deadline, we'll start having the areas that were covered by the moratorium will then be ready to be available for that December meeting of the Planning Commission. So just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. And again, a report's forthcoming to kind of detail the activities and what we've done and what we expect to see in the future.
Thank you.
Just wanted to give you a quick update on some of the stuff the fire department's been doing. During the storm, like Dan alluded to, we actually had all 4 stations manned and ready to respond if we needed. We only actually went out once for a storm-related call. We went out for a couple medical calls other than that. Our fire prevention, where we go out to the schools and daycares, are in full swing. Did that all last week, and we're doing that each day this week as well, where we teach the kids about fire safety and what to do. And then our Explorer post went to Helena on September 16th, and they competed in a competition. Out of 7 events, they placed in 4 of them. They brought home 2/3, a second, and a first place trophy. They were training really hard for this, and their training paid off. For the fiscal year of 2017, the fire department answered 1,025 calls for service. That's 160 calls over 2016 for the fiscal year. And it's the biggest increase in call volume for us since 2013. Of those calls, 648 were in the city limits, 353 were in a fire jurisdiction, so that's 1,001 calls for the city limits fire jurisdiction area. 11 times we went to Barnwell, 10 times we went to Daphne, twice we went to Fish River Marlow, and once we actually went to Robertsdale. So we're very, very busy department, and the guys, the department handled it very well. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right, one more, Chief.
Good afternoon. I just want to emphasize what Dan said. I thought that all departments worked well. I was in Tampa, and I was in contact with John Saraceno the whole time, and then I came back Saturday morning, got back here, got situated about lunchtime, and I started riding around checking on things. I think that Stephanie handled everything very well, her and the other 2 lieutenants. One of the things I heard said, Sherry Lee was saying, is about we need to communicate with the public a lot better, because About 5:30 Sunday morning, the water was about that far from the bottom of the big pier. So that meant it was over all of the little piers. Well, they were tore up. I didn't see them when I went down there. And we had people trying to go out on the pier. We had the top of the hill blocked off. And sometimes people don't understand what barricades are and everything. And so we had one lady, and I told her, I said, ma'am, you can't go out there to check on your boat. And I gave her my binoculars, and she said, well, it's still floating. And so I said, well, that's great. I gave her a ride back up to the top of the hill, left, sent a police officer down there. She went back, was going to go back and check her boat. So we do need to communicate with the public a little better to let them know that, you know, when we have these storms and stuff, you need to stay home, because it was nails and boards everywhere I went, and it was just all kind of problems. And I think the electric department did a great job. I met with them about 6 o'clock Sunday morning down at the barn, and they had been out most of the night. They worked in shifts kind of like we did, so I thought everybody worked great together.
Thank you, Chief. All right. Go ahead and end the meeting, and we will adjourn for about 5 minutes and get started with our council meeting.